So when we think about counterfeit, what do you think of when you think of the word and hear the word counterfeit?
Money.
Money, right? That's the first thing that pops in most people's heads.
Fake.
Right? Fake, right? Something fake. And that's really what it is, But most people think of counterfeit money. There's other things that can be counterfeit. You can have counterfeit clothing, counterfeit sunglasses, counterfeit watches. All that stuff can be counterfeit. They can produce, but the biggest thing we think about is money. Criminals, they try to produce money. They try to make it as close to as possible to the real thing. They try to pass it off as genuine bills, trying to, scam merchants and people just into accepting it. And if you don't know what to look for, it's easy to get deceived. It's easy to to take it in, thinking it's real, and then getting over. You hear stories all the time about this, right? About people accepting counterfeit money. And then the Secret Service gets involved, because the Secret Service actually gets involved in any counterfeit operation, because they're in charge and help with the Treasury and all of that. Because it's a real threat, people that are familiar with money, they take precautions. They're trained on what to do to spot counterfeit bills. You go to like a store, and you give someone bills. They may pull out a pen, right, and swipe them.
Swipe them.
Yeah, swipe them with a pen. There's their counterfeit detection pen. Either two different colors of ink. You give them a $20 bill, they'll tell you if it's real or fake.
I've never had that happen. No.
Well, you may have not ever gone to a place where they do that,
No.
but it happened. If you go up here to Dollar General up here, they'll do it.
Really?
I gave them a $20 bill and they swiped it.
Oh,
With a pen.
all I've seen anybody ever do, they don't ever do this anyways. It's just,
Well, you can look up at it. You can look up at it. There's multiple ways to do it, but because the easiest way is because it tests to see if the ink, because they do a certain kind of paper at the Treasury, and so it's not just normal printer paper like this is on. It's actually specific paper that's got certain material, certain chemicals in it that reacts differently to that ink. So it can help them detect it, or they can put it under. You may see them put it under a UV light or something like that, and that can help to detect counterfeit bills as well. Bank tellers are trained to spot counterfeits, and the way they do it is interesting. They're not trained on what to look for in a counterfeit bill. They are, but they don't study counterfeit bills. They don't look at counterfeit bills. They handle the real thing. They look at the real thing. They touch, they smell, they feel. They're continually interact. What?
they smell money.
Yeah.
Why?
Because real money, I'm sure everything, like anything, has a unique smell. And if the more senses you use to know something, the more you can tell if it's a fake or not.
This one's cream cheese.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, so they don't spend that time studying the fake ones. They handle the real $100 bills. A lot of times, cashiers and banks, they can tell just by touching a bill if it's counterfeit or not, because they've handled so much of the real thing. The same is true for us when it comes to discipleship. If we want to know what a true disciple looks like, and what we should be doing, we need to know the one we're called to follow. We need to look into the Bible to see what we're supposed to do, to see how we're supposed to go about our lives. The scariest thing about counterfeits is that they sometimes can look really close to the real thing. That's how sometimes counterfeit bills get by. Because some things people do is they'll take some other bills that are smaller, like they may take a $1 bill, and they may wash all the ink off of it, and then print $5 or $20 or $100 on it. So it's on the paper. So it's got the real paper, so it'll pass that test, but it's not really a $100 bill.
What's the largest, like, $1, not $1, but like $1 bill amount?
As far as I know, it's 100.
Okay.
That's all I've seen.
What about in other countries?
It all depends. There's some that are thousands, 5,000.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It just depends on the country and the currency, because what you got to remember, 5,000 of something over there may be the equivalent of $5 over here.
Yeah.
So, but that's the same as true. So they may look identical to the real thing, and on the surface there appears to be no difference. But once you dig deeper, you find those differences. You see the differences, and you can tell what's different. It's false at its core. Many of the activities that we do as a disciple, they can be done with integrity. They can be done with that, but, really aren't done with, and can appear as authentic, but yet not really be authentic. So as we look at this, we'll focus on Jesus as the teacher, as our teacher, and we'll learn about our responsibilities in moving forward as a disciple of Christ in that. You look at Matthew 5 through 7, and we're not going to read all of that because that's, would take most of the rest of the time today. But Matthew 5 through 7 is probably the most famous sermon that's ever been preached. We refer to it as the Sermon on the Mount. Here, Jesus went up with his disciples, and we'll look at some of the couple of passages in here. We'll look at two passages here, and then we'll look at another couple of them throughout here. So we see Matthew 5, 1-2. When he saw the crowds, he went up to the mountains, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them. And then we read Matthew 7, 24-29. Everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a sensible man who built his house on the rock. The rains fell, the rivers rose, and the winds blew and pounded the house. Yet it did not collapse, because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't act on them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the rivers rose, the winds blew and pounded the house, and it collapsed. And the collapse was great. When Jesus had finished this sermon, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, because he was teaching them like one who had authority, and not like their scribes. Both of these passages teach us about the importance that we need to learn from Jesus. We need to be in the Bible to learn from our discipleship, to learn about going forward, to learn how we can spot those who have a counterfeit message. Because there's a lot of pastors out there who say one thing that goes against the Bible, and they can really easily pull you off track, pull you out of true Christianity very easily from your life. So we see that as we look at this story, that the apostles, the disciples, they were ready to learn. They got in a position to where they were able to learn. That's what we need to do in our lives. Whether that's coming to church, studying in our own personal devotions, that we need to learn as much as we can. We looked at Jesus took throughout his whole ministry. One of the things he did multiple times was he took things that had been things from the Old Testament and applied them to the lives today and expanded on them to expect more out of his disciples. He did that, and we see that throughout the New Testament. Jesus kept repeating the phrase, "You've heard it said." And then he said, "But I say to you, but I tell you, do this instead. Go above and beyond from what you've heard." Jesus called us to have a higher level of obedience than just barely obey the law, not just toe the line, but go above and beyond. He pushed them to shape the culture around them, not to be shaped by the culture. And that's what we have to do in our society today. There's too many people out there who are being shaped by the culture around us, by being shaped by what's popular, instead of being shaped by what the Bible says. And we always got to take whatever society says and look at it through the lens of the Bible and compare it to see what we need to believe. Because we have to always go back to what the Bible says, not to what the world says. Because we will answer for what we've been told, we're be held accountable for what's in the Bible. As we see, that first passage we looked at, that he went up the mountains and his disciples, he came to them. And once he got there, he started to teach them. He started to teach them and others. Not everyone heard his teaching. Not everyone took it. Because you know what? It wasn't convenient, right? Jesus didn't stay down at the bottom where it was convenient, he went up the mountain. And then the people followed him. Yes, it wasn't convenient. A lot of times it's not convenient for us sometimes to come to church. It's not, but they did it. We look at it. His disciples, they had already abandoned so much of their lives. They had left their family, their jobs, their careers. They had left so much behind to follow Jesus. And now they trekked up a mountain. I don't know about you all. I'm not much of an outdoors person. I don't like hiking. Hiking's not my forte. But, trekking up a mountain is not one of the things I would, like to do. But, if I had to do it, I'd do it. And because they did it, because they took that posture, they were ready to learn, they were blessed by that teaching. And we see how they affected the whole entire world. Getting ready and prepared to teach is a necessary step for his disciples, but it's not the last step in the process. There's a big difference, if you think about it, between disciples and students. Yes, many of them have the same characteristics. You're learning. You're interested in learning from a teacher. However, what your purpose as a student is to learn to get a degree or to learn to achieve something, a grade, pass a class, or something like that. A disciple, on the other hand, learns to take orders for the sake of obedience, in order to take action. And that's what we're called to do as disciples. And we look here, we see another passage. Jesus regularly warned people about being conscious of people and their fruit when it comes to discipleship and looking at what people do. Matthew 7:15-17 is really tells us that we have to watch out for people. It says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravaging wolves. You'll recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree produces good fruit, but a bad tree produces bad fruit." Just think about that. We have to look at what people are saying. Because someone can come there and say things that may be true, and some things that may be false, but we have to look at it all, and look at their fruits, and look what happening is going on before we start following them. Because people are out there to try to pull us away from Christianity, pull us away from Christ. And the devil uses them to pull Christians away from Christianity. Going back to our passage that we read about, the second passage about the house on the rock and the house on the sand. I don't know about you, I think of the little kid song. The house on the rock stood firm, and the house on the sand went splat. That's what I think of every time I read. I think of that passage. We go through so many different storms, different trials in our lives as believers. You all may not have gone through a lot, in your life so far, but as you go on, we just need that firm foundation to stand, and it's important to get that foundation now in your lives. So as you have that, something solid to put your faith in, so that when you go through those rough times, when you go through those times when you start to doubt, that you know that you have that foundation that's firm, planted in Jesus, so that you can go on and know and still continue to participate in God's mission for the world. Because yes, things are going to come our way that are going to be hard for us to go through. But yet we still have to go through them. We can come through them with confidence and with happiness. And at the same time, Jesus teaches they serve as a foundation, and it's important that we avoid building on any kind of foundation that will be iffy, shaky, like the sand. So as we go out this week, I hope that you're building that. It's a great way for us to communicate and to understand the Bible, look at things, is to be part of a study group like that. Because, if you have questions, if you have things that you want to know about, we can bounce them off each other. We can talk through things to understand more. Because, no one fully understands the Bible. No one's ever going to fully understand every single word that's in here, every single passage, completely how God intended it to be. But yet, we can try to help each other out to understand. And there's a lot of tools out there that we all can help out. So if there's anything I can do to help you all out, or any questions you have through your studies, just let me know. And I'll be more than happy to help you out in any way, or we can discuss them in here in any way, anytime you have any questions.